I'm Remi. My pronouns are they, them. I'm still pretty new here. And I have to tell y'all that when this bulletin was printed 3 weeks ago on my first day here, I did not yet know that the version of Scripture that Plymouth uses is a little bit different than the one I'm used to using. And so I'm going to read today from the NRSV rather than the NRSV UE, and I'm just going to tell y'all it's slightly different from what's in your bulletins. If you want to nerd out with me sometime about what those differences are and why they're different, I'd love to do that. Just give me a call, but I'm not going to bore everyone in here with those details right now. So from the NRSV, Genesis 18, 1 through 15. The Lord appeared to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre as he sat at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. He looked up and saw 3 men standing near him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent entrance to meet them and bowed down to the ground and said, "My Lord, if I find favor with you, do not pass by your servant, but let a little water be brought and wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. Let me bring a little bread so you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant." So they said, "Do as you've said." And Abraham hastened into the tent to Sarah and said, "Make ready quickly 3 measures of choice flour, knead it, and make cakes." And then Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to the servant who hastened to prepare it. And then he took curds and milk and the calf that he'd prepared, and he set it all before them, and he stood by them under the tree while they ate. And they said to him, "Where's your wife, Sarah?" And he said, "There in the tent." Then one said, "I will surely return to you in due season, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent entrance behind him. Now, Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age, and it had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I have grown old and my husband is old, shall I have pleasure?" The Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?' Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? At the set time I will return to you in due season, and Sarah shall have a son." But Sarah denied, saying, "I didn't laugh," for she was afraid. He said, "Oh, yes, you did laugh." So we're in this series called Won't You Be My Neighbor? And we're going to stick with Abraham's family for the next few chapters of Genesis over 4 Sundays and just kind of watch them and see how they practice and fail to practice kindness and hospitality with their neighbors. This story is a pretty well-known exemplar of hospitality. Abraham welcomes strangers with open arms and provides for them out of his own resources, much more than they would have asked for. You've probably heard this story before in that context. Maybe you've even been in a Bible study that talks about it that way. It's not a bad reading of this story. In fact, it's a pretty good one. Abraham is a good neighbor. He opens up his home and shares his resources with the stranger. One of my favorite books on pastoral care, Hearing Beyond the Words, uses that reading. And the author explores listening as hospitality through that reading of this passage. Emma Justice explains that Abraham offers a gift to his guests, generous and open hospitality, and in return he receives a gift, the promise of a son. When we listen well, she argues, we do the same, giving and receiving in turn. So I wonder what would happen if we tried that out, listening as hospitality, on a character in this story who might seem like a supporting character, but what if she has a story to tell? Could we give her the neighborly gift of close listening? And I wonder if Sarah will be our neighbor in return. 3 measures of our finest flour kneaded into cakes. And now there's hardly any left. "Make cakes," he said, and then ran off to tell the help to do God knows what. Never mind that I had other plans for this flour. Never mind that I had just given the help a different task. Never mind that I had a plan for today, and this was not it. I could tell him about my plan for the day, but it wouldn't matter. He doesn't listen to me anymore. These 3 strangers showed up, and he wants to treat them like kings. Oh, I know, we have to give them something. Life in the desert is hard, and if we didn't take care of one another, none of us would make it. But the last of our best flour? And from the sound of it, that servant is slaughtering a calf. I mean, can we really spare a calf from our herd? I could protest, I could encourage some moderation, but he wouldn't listen. There was a time when he listened to me, you know. We actually grew up together. No one remembers that about us, but we were playmates as children, back when all of our people lived together, before God sent us out here to this desert, before God changed our names, before God's covenant, before God. God talks a big talk, but I haven't seen much in the way of results. Years and years and years ago, God promised to make Abram, that was his name back then, into a great nation. All he had to do was leave. Leave our home, our family, our land, everything. And move out here to this wasteland. We weren't ambitious people. We never asked to become a nation. I mean, we did think we'd have a few kids, but we just wanted a simple life with our family on our homelands. But that was years ago. And since then, we've not even so much as had one child. Oh, there have been promises of a son, more than I can count. God just keeps coming back and saying, we're still going to have a son, but nothing. I got so desperate, I told Abram to sleep with my slave. Oh, how I wish I could take that back. That I'd never suggested such a scheme, or that he hadn't listened to me. Imagine that. Back then, he still listened to me, and it got us all in trouble. That girl got pregnant right away. She didn't even have to try. And she didn't even want it. Here I am after all these years. I used to count the days from my period like my life depended on it. I would forage for herbs that are rumored to help. Sometimes I would even miss cycles, and I'd hope and hope and hope, but nothing. Sometimes I've been sure that it worked, just sure that there was life inside of me. I think at least a couple times there actually was. But Abram said I was imagining things, that the stress was making me miss periods. But I think there was something. Regardless, it hardly matters, because if there was life in there, it never survived long enough for us to be sure. All those years, all that praying, all that bedtime, all that bedtime. It was a part-time job, all that bedtime. And if you count the foraging and the calendaring and the bleeding, well, my part of trying for an heir was a full-time job. More than. I was almost relieved when we gave up. Just let Hagar do it, I suggested. And he listened. Imagine that. Those were the days when my husband listened to me. And how I wish he hadn't. That girl got pregnant so quick it was insulting. And I know, that's what I wanted. That's why I invited her into my husband's embrace, or pushed her into it. I mean, she wasn't even happy about that baby. So ungrateful. Doesn't she know that some of us would kill for a womb like hers? All those years, all that praying, all that bedtime, and it took her one night with my husband. I was so mad I kicked her out. But she came back. God sent her back, apparently, and she had that baby, and technically, legally, it's our baby. God will make a nation out of him. And I was so overcome with envy and anger and grief, but also part of me was relieved that we could just stop trying. Stop counting the days, stop foraging for herbs, stop feeling all my hopes fall every month at the sight of blood. Maybe, after all these years, I could have my husband back. Maybe we could rekindle some joy in our marital bed. But I didn't get my husband back. Everything changed after I gave him into another woman's arms. It was worse than before. I mean, after a while, we just stopped trying. I don't even bleed anymore, so the sonship has sailed, but I had hoped we could have some fun. But we didn't. And we stopped talking, too. This man who was my childhood companion, my adolescent lust, my leader on this journey into the desert, my companion in all those years of want and try and bleed and grieve. I've borne the brunt of this load, but he's at least been there. He's listened. And now we barely say 2 words to one another. Once my husband, now hardly even my neighbor. Well, I baked him his cakes. He got the calf and some milk, just the finest meal we could offer, and he's out there now, watching those strangers eat, ready to get them whatever they might need. He's a good man. Not everyone out here would be so kind to strangers. Most would offer them some bare bones food and shelter, but not this feast. And some, I don't even want to think of what would have happened to these men if they stopped in some of these nearby towns. It's not so bad, this life. We have enough to eat, which is more than some of our neighbors can say, more than these strangers. And he's not unkind, just a bit inconsiderate. Of me, that is. Clearly, he's very considerate of everyone else who wanders through this desert. So I didn't get to do what I'd planned today, but it's done now. I'm enjoying the evening quiet, sipping on some wine while Abraham entertains our guests. No, I won't join them. I'll just listen. I think the tall one just asked about me. That's weird. I wonder how he knows my name, my new name, too. Did he just say what I think he just said? That stranger just told my husband that he's going to come back here and I'm going to have a son. Me. He said my name. Not that Abraham will have a son, but that I will. Okay, after all these years, now that we're both old, here's a question. Will I have pleasure? My husband will come back to my bed, but will he look at me like a woman again? Without the ghost of another woman in his eyes? Will he embrace me with love and care and kindness? Or will this be the chore of years gone by, worse now that we're both so old and tired and our bodies don't work the way they used to? No, I won't have pleasure. Not after all this time. Whatever magic this stranger is peddling is just going to send us back into that never-ending, never-rewarding work of trying to conceive, and it won't work. Whatever it is, it won't reverse the years, won't undo all we've been through, won't take away the night he spent with Hagar, or take away how I sent her to him. We may have our bedtime, but there's no pleasure left for us. I think they're still talking. He's asking why I laughed. Did he hear me? There's no way he heard me. No, this is no ordinary visitor. This is someone supernatural, someone divine. And I should have known when he asked after me by my new name. I should have listened closer. Well, clearly he wasn't listening that closely. He thinks my main concern was having a son. Church, listening is hard. It's hard to listen to Sarah in this story. Did you notice it, how her words got twisted? When she hears the promise, Sarah laughs and says, "After I've grown old and my husband has grown old, will I have pleasure?" And then the Lord says, why did Sarah laugh and say, "Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?" It's not quite what she said. It seems to me that Abraham heard but didn't hear Sarah's concerns. In his radical neighborliness to the strangers, he forgot to be a neighbor to his own spouse. And it seems that generations of storytelling and oral tradition have preserved his misunderstanding. Indeed, some translations of Scripture even change Sarah's own words to a more palatable reading. And yet something, the women, the universe, God, also preserved Sarah's actual concerns, right alongside the misconstrual of them. Someone was listening. In fact, I don't believe that this indecent concern could have possibly made it into our biblical canon without a God who listens, a God who hears, a God who cares about our stories and preserves them, even imperfectly. The men in this story may not have listened, but God did. And so we still have Sarah's story. God made sure. I think neighborliness is listening. Listening is the difference between opening up your home and actually being hospitable. It's the difference between living near someone and being their neighbor. And listening is just another way of saying noticing. It's not just about what we hear or what's said, it's about what's implied, what is clear if we pay attention, what we miss if we don't. Do you notice when the car across your street isn't home at the normal time for several days in a row? Do you wonder if your neighbor's working late? Do you wonder why? Or what about on social media? We can listen online too. Do you notice when your friend who usually posts every day suddenly stops? Do you wonder why? Do you ask? In this story, it's especially hard to listen to Sarah because she's talking about a private activity that makes us squirm. Right along with death, money, and politics, it's one of those things we would rather leave unsaid, or at least unheard. She's talking about what she wants out of that activity, and it's not what we thought she wanted, maybe not even what we think she should want. We think she'd better keep that in the bedroom, keep it personal, keep it private. But sex is political. She is to mother a nation. How does she feel about that? I don't think she doesn't want a child, but she is saying that's not all she wants. And those who are busy plotting a nation are not interested in her concerns. I say sex is political, but we also want to keep politics private, don't we? Let's all just get along, not ask who we voted for. But just like the personal is political, the political is personal. Just like bedrooms can make nations, nations can invade bedrooms. Y'all don't know me very well yet, but I think most of you know that I'm queer. My pronouns are they, them. I'm married to a person whose name is Nathan and whose pronouns are she, her. Nothing about us, our names, our marriage, our pronouns, none of it's predictable from typical heterosexual and cisgender assumptions. People don't really know us unless they listen to us. Really listen to us. And we're from Texas. And now we're here in Iowa, and some of y'all keep telling me, can I still say y'all here? Some of y'all keep telling me that your state is trying to become Texas, so I think y'all know or can imagine all the ways that we haven't been listened to. all the ways I've had to scream my own name so I don't forget it. Putting my pronouns on a name tag that doesn't have space for them. Insisting on my own personhood so it isn't erased. All the ways politics try to erase it because they don't want to listen. I think you already know all of that, so I won't dwell on it. I'm a newcomer here, and I think you all are already listening to me. You've read about me in your newsletter. You've welcomed me and talked with me over these last few weeks. Some of you even met me back in March when I came to visit. You've invited me into your pulpit and let me talk about sex. Okay, you didn't know I was going to do that, but you haven't kicked me out yet. I trust y'all. I trust that you're listening. What I'm really hoping is that you will trust me when I say I am listening to you. What I said before about me and Nathan, that no one really knows us unless they listen to us, that's not just true for queer people, it's true for everyone. It's true for all of you. No one knows you unless they listen to you. And it might take me a little longer to get to know you because there's one of me and there's like hundreds of you, but I'm committed. I'm here. And while I'm here, it is not my intention to live in my study and preach to you things that I learned in school before I even met you. I want to know you all. In exchange for the hospitality you've extended to me, I want to return it by listening. And I'm listening even if what you want to say is about sex or death or money or politics or even religion. I'm here. I'm listening. Won't you be my neighbor?